Welcome back to another Post-Media Ottawa Senators panel. I'm Bruce Garriock, pleased to be joined today by my colleague Ken Warren of the Ottawa Sun and Ottawa Citizen, and Marc Methot, former Senators defenseman and TSN analyst. And as we speak this morning, guys, the Senators have hit the 50-game mark. They are 6 points out of a playoff spot. How do we kind of look at where they are right now, Marc? Or should people be disappointed with where they are, or should they be pleased that they're kind of back in the playoff race?
Oh, and you're going to start with me here. Okay, well, I'm sure, and you guys probably have more of the stats here, but I'm just looking at it from a big picture perspective. I know there was so much enthusiasm going into the season. I don't need to get into that. It was the summer of Pierre. There were some big acquisitions. We can all acknowledge that. Certainly, injuries have been a huge issue. I think this just highlights how crucial and important Josh Norris is. That's another point I'd like to make too. I mean, his defensive play has been missed big time, how responsible he is in his own zone, and then of course his goal scoring touch, which has been an issue for the Ottawa Senators. Yes, I would say it's been disappointing in that I think when I had them projected, where I had them projected was just outside looking in, going into the spring, right? Approaching the playoff time, I thought they'd be just missing out. Now you could argue what's the difference whether you're toward the bottom of the barrel or not. If you're not in the dance, you're not in it. But for me, it's all about progression and seeing the team move forward. This streak that they're on right now, if you want to call it that, certainly has elevated the enthusiasm level in the fan base, and everyone's kind of getting happy again. A couple big wins against Montreal, Toronto. So, that's how quickly things can change and the sentiment can change around the team. But I think overall, I am a little disappointed, but I'm very happy with the way the core looks and the direction that that's heading in.
Ken, they've got that 4-game winning streak, as Marc mentioned, going into the break. They moved one game above 500. I think they have 11 games before the trade deadline when they come back, and we'll get to the trade deadline in a minute. But they have the possibility of playing meaningful games in March, and really, at this juncture, that's all they promised.
To me, they're such a weird team. Whenever it seems like there's a pressure point, whether they got rolling in December there and they got to Christmas and said, hey, this is the run they needed, they're back in it within maybe striking distance, and then they hit a wall again in January, and then late January they picked it up again. So I say they come back from the break and it really becomes a pressure packed situation for them.
Yeah, and I was on SportsCenter last night with Jay, Marc, and one of the things he asked me is Pierre Dorion a buyer or seller? I said right now Pierre Dorion is sitting firmly on the fence. Is that where you would be if you were him with the March 3rd trade deadline approaching? Pardon me.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I saw the segment and I agreed. I mean, I think to give a clear-cut answer right now is very difficult. I don't think anybody has a crystal ball and can predict it. You can certainly take a chance. I'd like to see where they're at after perhaps another 5 to 10 games. I don't know how much, if we have that luxury at this point, but certainly this 11-day break sort of throws a wrench at everybody, I think, right? Because I think the momentum is a thing and it's a real thing, and certainly you want to see the team progress. Then the counter argument, of course, is perhaps you get Artem Zub back here at some point with that time off, allow him to recover. I don't like labeling it, from one extreme to the other, whether you're a buyer or a seller. I think you're an opportunist, right? I think if you have an opportunity to get a player, let's just say a defenseman in this case, where there's potential in perhaps signing that person or that player to a long-term deal and to get some longevity out of that, then I'm all for it. I don't see, and I'm sure you guys might have a differing opinion here, but I don't see a short-term acquisition as beneficial in any way. In my mind, being a former player, I can't make sense of it. You know what I mean? But if you could go after a defenseman right now, or I don't know that they need a forward, so I'll just stick to the D-man. I mean, you go and you do it. And at some point, with the assets you have, you're going to have to part ways with one of them. And that's the contentious discussion. That's the part now that gets very murky. It's like, who do you get rid of? Because everybody's going after Pinto. Everyone's going to go after Greig. Everyone's going to go after one of your top tier guys. I don't like the idea of getting rid of any of those players. I'm in the camp and in the belief that you hold on to them. It just depends on who you're looking at, right? If you're looking for a top tier, top 4, or maybe even a top pairing defenseman, you're going to have to give a little. So that's where I'm at now. And I know that's a pretty vague answer. I don't know what the right answer is at this point.
Well, Ken, and I think that they don't have a whole hell of a lot to sell either.
Right.
I mean,
yeah,
teams aren't going to be knocking down the door for Tyler Mott. I
No.
apologize. He's a world-class penalty killer, but nobody's going to be looking at him and saying, we'll give you a first-round pick. They'll give you a 6th or 7th-round pick. Nobody has called about Cam Talbot. I can say that.
And that's
nobody's called.
I went through the options a week ago to see what's out there, and if you look at maybe some depth defensemen out there, if somebody's interested in Hamonic or maybe Nick Holden, depth insurance guys, Cam Talbot, but Cam Talbot's injured, like you say, Bruce. I just, you're right. You're not getting a lot in return, even if you move one of those guys. I guess the alternative side of it, if you do make a move and you deal one of those guys, does it open the door? Maybe you get a long look at Bernard Docker, and is this guy going to be an NHL defenseman in the future? But you're right. The selling pieces here aren't really overly exciting compared to what's going to be out there, right?
Yeah, and Bruce, what's your thought? So you guys mentioned Tyler Mott, and I've seen some conflicting, theories on that. You mentioned he's a world-class penalty killer, which I completely agree with. So do you part ways with him, or do you not hang on to him because you're going to end up having to look for a player just like him at some point afterwards? No?
That's right. Like, you're going to have to replace him. It's kind of like, and I asked Kenny and Claire this question last week, but I'd love to get your take as a former defenseman, Mark. Would you sign Travis Hamonic for one more year?
Oh, that's a tough one. This is where I don't envy any general manager's job. Look, I guess it depends on who else is available, but you need depth pieces, and it depends. Like, where does Eric Brandstrom fit into the scenario next season?
Exactly.
Where does you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you have a plan, and you know where Eric Brandstrom ends up, or what happens, and Nick Holden's got another year, right, on his deal.
No, he's done.
Holden's done. Yeah. Pardon me. So in that case, if you're looking at the two of them, Hamonic is serviceable as a third pairing defenseman, and I don't see how you could argue against that. I know people can be fairly critical of his play. Well, that's because he's playing with Jake Sanderson and he's trying to keep up with him. But if you put him on a third pairing, he could find a role there for sure. It just comes down to dollars, right? And if you can get him on a sweetheart deal, then yeah, you can make an argument there.
Guys, is the best deal that Pierre Dorion did in the summer the one that he did at a press conference on, I think it was in late August or early September, signing Tim Stutzle to an 8-year deal? Mark, I really think that we're kind of watching a guy develop into a superstar before our very eyes. Yeah,
I mean, you nailed it. And you look at the chemistry now that he's forming with Brady, the two of them, and that's to me that's a big one right there. You watch the way he's playing and the confidence that he carries when he's playing alongside Brady Tkachuk. I mean, just the way he looks at him, he's looking at him like he's an older brother. And more specifically with Stutzle, the speed, the skill set, everything that he's bringing to the table now, and mixing that in with a little bit of confidence, a little bit of swagger. I mean, sky's the limit at this point. And it's all those little plays, those little pop plays that he's doing under pressure, those little evasion moves that he does in the offensive zone when he's under pressure, either on the power play or even 5-on-5. He's terrific. He's to me, at this point, creatively speaking, especially in the offensive zone, probably one of the top centermen now in the league. I mean, I don't want to be too bold and say, oh, he's a top 5 or a top 10 guy, but he's certainly, at his age, just blowing that out of the water. I mean, he's done such a fantastic job. So he's finding chemistry. Now Ottawa finally has a legitimate, 1-2 punch with him and Norris. And where you want to put him when Norris is healthy is up to, the coach. But right now with Brady and Timmy right there alongside each other, that chemistry has been incredible.
What I really like in his game, and first 2 seasons we'd see that, like the chart, you have a great game and then he hit rock bottom, be poor defensively, make dumb mistakes, back up and down and up and down. And Mark, you've obviously played. It's just straightening that line out, right? So there's way more solid games, and then he has a dip, he has a bad game here or there, but it's right back. It doesn't linger anymore.
Yeah, and that's all up here, right? Like that's obviously there's seasoning and there's physical maturity, but he's already there. I mean, you've seen him off the ice. He's thick, he's strong, he's a pretty big boy, all things considered, and I think that's what makes him so dynamic. And so I like that point that you made there, Ken, in that you're starting to see that consistency where if he does slide, that slide isn't going to last for 5 games. He's going to pick it right back up where he left off the following game, and his bounce back is much better. And I credit obviously his line mates and his teammates and the leadership group around him as well. But yeah, you can count on him now, and you can count on him in the defensive zone, and that's really what's making him so dangerous.
Well, before we go here, I think before they head into this 10-day break, I think we need to talk about the newest hit sensation in Ottawa, and that's Ridley Greig. Ken, people didn't know what the Senators were getting when they called him up. Well, I just shouldn't say that, but he has made a pretty good impression. He's solidified that middle in a lot of ways, hasn't he?
Yeah, I again with young guys, you want to see over extended time, right? Like he's had what's his 5 games now? He's played really well. I just can he maintain it for a long stretch? And we talk about his size and dealing with maybe the bigger players, but so far fantastic. And the question is, can he maintain it over a long haul? I think he's been exactly a type of two-way player you rarely see when they first step into the NHL.
Right.
Mark, Mark, one of the concerns about him in the AHL was that he played too big. And do you think he's come up here and not tried to play too big?
Yeah.
And that might be a dumb way to put it, but
no, but I understand what you mean. I mean, he plays bigger than he obviously is at the AHL level. He gets away with a little bit more. It's harder to do that at the NHL level because everyone's just better. Everyone's a little bit stronger. You certainly have better skaters up and down the lineup. Even those fourth line guys can move, right? So my concern, and that kind of goes along the same line as Ken, is that he hasn't really played. I mean, you look at his numbers. I mean, what the most he's played in the last 4 years has been 39 games, and that was in Brandon.
Yeah.
So that's the adjustment. And you see it a lot in these young players that come up, and usually injuries ensue as well. That comes up. But if he can just kind of ease his way in and out, that's why I like the timing of the call-up as well. And you've seen him adjust his game, Bruce, just as you've mentioned, where he's not necessarily playing as big as he needs to or as big as he has been. You're seeing a little bit more compensating maybe in the defensive zone. He had some real nice defensive plays, particularly in that first game. So you're seeing flashes of brilliance here and here. And that's what makes it so exciting with Ridley Greig, is you don't really know where he's going to end up, over the course of the next year and a half. So they've got a real nice piece there. I don't want to see him tame his game up that much. I think the more confident he gets here at this level, you're going to see a little bit more of that physical swagger come out where he'll turn into a little bit more of a pest.
Last guy I wanted to talk about, because it was a bit of a surprise to see him sent to the AHL, is Mark Kastelik. There's 2 things going on here, guys, and we can get both your takes on this. One is they feel that he is nursing a minor ailment, so he's not going to play in AHL right away. But secondly, they feel like his confidence has gone downhill. This is the last time they can send him back without putting him through waivers, Mark. It's probably as good a time as any, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and being the former player in this case, I kind of feel for him because you battle up here all season.
I know.
Plays like, and I understand.
I know, because he should have the chance to be on a beach right now.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Now, but on the flip side, I can understand what the organization is doing because they want his confidence back, and they don't give a hoot about the beach. They just want him to play hockey and find his confidence again. And yeah, I would agree with that. To a degree, you can certainly see that confidence has dipped a little bit, but you also got to remember that this is who he is, right? I know he's only 23, but he's not a guy that's going to put up 25 goals. He's a role player on that fourth line that has to play a physical game. He's imposing. He gets to the net front. Certainly, in my opinion, an upgrade from Austin Watson, in that regard. Bit better skater, much stronger. But, aside from maybe the feelings that I can sympathize that he's not on a beach, I can also understand, okay, he needs to find a little confidence again. I'm not sure he's going to find that in the American League. I certainly didn't when I went down for that one game in Binghamton when I was hurt. I was a -3 in that game. And then I called Brian Murray up and I said, no more, I'm coming back.
Kenny, I don't think Mark Castle.
No, I'm just going to say,
calling
good,
Pierre Dorion saying,
good call
yeah.
for Mark Castle to make that call to Pierre Dorion. Yeah. I agree with you guys. It's a rough roll. I mean, his numbers were dipping. He was getting down to 6, 7, 8 minutes a game, and how much of an impact can you make? And then if you make one mistake, then that chops into your ice time. You fall behind in a game. You're not going to be out there in the third period. Really tough position. So really, it's almost like the guy has to, when he gets his first 2 or 3 shifts in the game, you got to be impactful, right? And I would imagine that puts a lot of heat on the guy going into a game, and that you really have to establish your forecheck, whatever you're doing, really early on. I'm sure they'd like to see a few more goals here, but that isn't what his job is, let's face it.
Well, guys, I appreciate your time today. Thanks to TSN analyst Marc Methot for joining us, former Senators defenseman, and my colleague from Citizen and Sun, Ken Warren. Guys, we won't be on a beach, but we'll probably be like everybody else in Ottawa, hoping hell freezes over so we can go and skate on the canal. Have a great weekend.
Take care.